And there you have it. If you follow my easy instructions, you will create the ideal cookie for your next Christmas party, the perfect holiday treat.
Who needs it? Who needs it? It is so good to see you guys. Welcome to North Shore. My name is Jonathan Wolfgang. I'm one of the pastors here, and whether we've met or not, I'm so glad to have you here, and it's an honor to get to be part of this series. Hello, those online listening in as well as those here in the room, so it's good to see you guys. I've got a number of friends, maybe some of you can relate to this. I've got a number of friends right now who are expecting or have recently had kids. And in all of the preparations for that big moment, of course, getting nurseries ready and doing all those different sorts of things, maybe the most pressure-packed piece of that experience is picking the kid's name, right? When you think about that, how incredibly important that is, that for the rest of their life they're going to have to carry this label and they will have very little that they can do about it. And there are certain rules that go into making this decision well. For instance, if you ever dated anyone seriously with a certain name, right? Then that name is off the table. That is not available for consideration when it comes to your offspring, right? That was a rule in our house at least. Parents, if you had someone you did not like, or there was some creepy neighbor or relative, those names are off limits too, right? In fact, I was talking with a friend of mine after last service who's a teacher, and he said after years of teaching, there are no names that he could choose from, right? He's reached a point of like, we're just gonna call them guttural grunts or something, I'm not sure. But it takes a lot of effort to get this right, and you have to be thoughtful because even unintentionally, you may wind up giving a name that they may later regret. For instance, the Mann family had a little girl, and they named her Anita. Anita Mann, yes. Absolutely true, laying the groundwork for a lifetime of codependency there in little Anita's life. There's a lady truly named Eileen Wright, and trying to figure out who she's going to vote for in the midterms next year. These are people that I actually know personally. There's a pastor I know, he's now passed away, but previous generation, Harry Pitts. That was his name, a pastor. Another pastor I know his son's better than I knew him. His name, Ivan Oder, which just sounds, but that's absolutely true. Sometimes you stumble into it in marriage. There's a woman named Helen. She married a guy with the last name of Back, which made her Helen Back, right? And her husband said after 10 years of marriage, she was living up to that name. But anyway. So you have to be careful about this, and believe me, the middle schooler in me wants to tell you way more that aren't appropriate for a setting like this. I'll just admit that. I tried one of them last service. It didn't go very well. I'll just tell you, all right? So there's editing in my talk. I'm just going to tell you up front. Even in my own life, some of you know, I've got 3 kids. They're now kind of 14 down to 11, and their names are Stone, Macy, and Piper. And people sometimes would give us sort of quizzical looks when we tell them our kids' names. I always say the same thing. Have your own kids, name them whatever you want, all right? It's none of your business. But you've got to be thoughtful about names. You've got to be thoughtful about this deal because they have meanings, they have implications. They can form who we become. And this season, we're of course remembering one who's been known by many names. Many people just know him as the baby in the manger, right? Others call him the Christ, the Messiah. They call him Emmanuel. I'm talking, of course, about Jesus. And in the many promises that we find in the Bible, hundreds and hundreds of years before Jesus was ever born, we see names that were promised that he would carry, that he would fulfill. One of the best known is a passage that we regularly hear, especially this time of year, those famous words from the prophet Isaiah. In Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6, when promising 700 years before it happened, the prophet says this, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called," these will be his names, "Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." I mean, you've heard that verse. It shows up on Christmas cards. You see it on banners. Even at the mall, there are things that point to some of this kind of language. Christmas songs. And even though he wasn't actually born for several centuries, Isaiah promised that someday would come a kid who would capture everyone's attention. So remarkable that he would live up to these incredible titles. First, Wonderful Counselor. And who couldn't use someone in their life whose insight and perspective sheds wisdom and light on getting through life? I know I need that in my life. Wonderful Counselor. It says he'll be a mighty God. There will be an unmistakable power and authority to this person's life, to their teaching, to how they carry themselves. Nothing will be too great for him. Not storms, not diseases, not even death itself, because he's a mighty God. He'll also be an everlasting Father. Not the kind of imperfect father that many experience in this life, that sometimes happens in this world, but a reliable protector and provider that you know you can count on, that you know will be there when you need him. He will be an everlasting Father. But it's this last title that I want to particularly focus on and talk about today, because it's not only on our minds this time of year, on our Christmas cards, in our songs, it's a subject that people crave and long for all 12 months. His name, Isaiah says, will be the Prince of Peace. Maybe just pause for a minute and think about how much unrest there is in the world. This week I was searching around online. I found the website of the Council on Foreign Relations. They actually have an area on their site called their Global Conflict Tracker. And I checked it again yesterday to have the latest stats. It identifies at least 28 major conflicts, violent conflicts, currently happening in the world right now. From sectarian violence in Myanmar, to the ongoing violence in the Democratic Republic of Congo, to simmering tensions we all hear about in North Korea, our world is filled with turmoil. And this doesn't even include the lesser known ones that don't make it into our news broadcasts or into our coverage, things you've never heard about. For example, right now, the last several weeks, there's been major unrest in the Central American country of Honduras. And even in the very best years, Honduras is a rough place. It regularly shows up at the top of the list of the most violent and crime-ridden places on the earth. But this is a particularly bad month, you see. There have been elections recently, and the results are very unclear, very contested. There have been allegations of widespread corruption and when it comes to vote counting. The police have instituted curfews and so forth. Now, the reason I'm even telling you about this, you probably never heard about it at all, but it hit home with me because my roommate in college is a missionary there. And he's been sending me texts these last few weeks. What he does, he leads a Bible college there in Honduras that trains locals to become pastors and church planters throughout the region. And he lives there with his wife and his two very young kids. And every night, the last few weeks, almost every night, he's had to sit up, gun in hand, protecting his home. I didn't have to do that the last couple weeks. And yet, things aren't necessarily all that much better within our borders. Not violent like that, perhaps, but let's put it this way. Would you say our current national climate is more on the side of harmony and peace or a little tense? How would you assess it, right? And forget nationally, let's talk in our homes, right? Divorce attorneys and family therapists continue to have remarkably high job security in our world, don't they? And you can be sure, if you haven't experienced it already, most families, there will be some sort of flare-up. Why? Because there's even unrest at home. How's this for a happy Christmas message? Everybody enjoying this? Isn't it fun? Feeling it? You feeling the Christmas spirit? And yet that's the truth, isn't it? And you can gloss over it with sugar plums and candy canes. But there's still something deep inside us, not just the things in our world or in our nation or even in our families, in our hearts. This sense that something's just off. This sense of dis-ease, this restlessness. There seems to be a pretty universal sense in our world, in our nation, in our families, in our hearts. Something is missing. Something is wrong. It's missing peace. It's missing peace. And no matter your political leanings, your religious beliefs, your socioeconomic status, the one thing we all share is a longing for peace. And yet Isaiah said one day would come one who would bring a message of sanity to an insane world. He would be called the Prince of Peace, Isaiah says. And centuries after this prophet had predicted his arrival, angels finally appeared to a group of sheep herders outside the small town of Bethlehem about 2,000 years ago. And their message, their announcement, Luke 2, glory to God in the highest, and on earth what? Peace. Peace. How we long for it. Peace. So in this Who Needs Christmas series, what we're asking, what is all this Christmas stuff? Why do we need it in our lives? Well, what I want to invite you to today is to pull back some of those layers and experience peace. How do we experience this peace? Not just this season, but throughout our lives. And I don't want to be guilty of naivete or oversimplicity, and yet the Bible speaks very directly to how to experience this peace. One of the people whose lives had been transformed by this Jesus, this Prince of Peace, a man named Paul, he wrote these words to his dear friends in a city called Philippi. And listen to what he writes, the classic text on peace and worry and joy in the Bible. Here's what it says, Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 9. Well known to many of you, rejoice in the Lord always, he writes. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable. If anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you've learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. Now, those are lovely words. That's sort of heartwarming, touching sorts of things. Probably written by some old guy sitting casually in a retirement home, right? Sipping pina coladas by the beach, overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. But those of you that know anything about this letter in the Bible, you know that's not the truth. This Paul, he's writing these very words with each hand chained to a prison guard, sitting in a jail cell, locked up because he's been telling people about this Prince of Peace, you see. And yet in the midst of these kinds of circumstances, he can still say, be full of joy, hang on to hope, no matter what you're facing, no matter what your circumstances, no matter how frustrating it may seem, peace is possible. And he does more than just say it's possible. He sketches out a strategy, a plan on how to experience it. So what does he say? It's crystal clear. Listen, looking specifically in verses 6 and 7, he says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, the peace of God that is completely unrelated to circumstances, the peace of God that defies description and boggles the mind, that very deep sense of peace will guard your hearts. This image of an army surrounding a city, guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. You want the peace of God? Paul says, here's how you get there. Now, a little quick side note here. There's a difference between having peace with God and having the peace of God. Having peace with God, that comes through the good news. For what Julie referenced earlier, through that image of transformation and new life that we just saw moments ago in baptism. Surrendering our lives to Jesus and learning to follow him. Romans 5:1 says it crystal clear. We have been justified through faith, made right through faith. We have peace with God through Jesus Christ our Lord. That's how we get peace with God. Peace with God is based on what Jesus did, and we respond. We surrender. We embrace this gift of new life. We put our trust in Him. And you cannot experience the peace of God if you are not first at peace with God. But I know lots of people who have peace with God. I mean, they've decided to follow Jesus. They've asked God for His grace. They believe He is who He said He was. They've taken steps of baptism. They're learning to follow Him and so forth. I know lots of people who have peace with God, but for some reason they can't figure out how to experience the peace of God. Maybe they've slipped into this mistaken thinking that just sort of naturally gets thrown in with the package. You'll just naturally experience this, not only peace with God, but peace of God. Paul here is talking about how do you experience that peace? Because the question is, what do we do when worries pop up? You see, here's the thing. Anxiety is a natural deal. It's a part of life. When you come face to face with some issue, with some threat, with some challenge, you will automatically feel a sense of intensity, a bit of stress, a little anxiety. What did Jesus say? In this world, you will have trouble. Don't be surprised. Anxiety is a natural response to that trouble or danger or stress in our lives. But anxiety is just a prompt. It's just a little spark. It asks us, what now are we going to do? And the key question is not will you feel anxiety, you will. The question is, what will you do when it comes? What does Paul say? When worry comes, instead of savoring it, ruminating on it, soaking in it, what does he say? Forward it on. Forward it on, like those annoying email chains that you still get, right? Through Facebook or wherever else. Forward it on. Don't hold on to that stuff. Pass it along through prayer. Oh, Wolfgang, that's too simple. Have you tried it? When worry comes, replace it with prayer, Paul says. But you say, no, I want to get rid of all worry in my life. I can't help you with that. I can just ask you, what are you going to do with that worry? Because trouble will come. Worries will come. What will you do with those worries? That's the key question. And Paul says, well, you replace it. You replace it with prayer. You replace it with prayer with thanksgiving. What does this mean? Does it mean thank God before He's even given something to you? And in a sense, yes. It's saying, God, here's what I'm asking for, and I thank you in advance because I know you are looking out for me. And even if these circumstances don't change, even if I don't get exactly what I'm asking for, I will thank you in advance because I believe you care about me. You know what I'm going through. I am not here alone. I trust you I have confidence that you will do what's right. I don't worry about it. I will trust you to guide my path. Here's another way of putting this that I hope will make more sense. Put it this way. You can either listen to your heart or you can talk to your heart. Do you know what I mean? You can listen to those little voices of worry and anxiety inside of you. And your heart will jump all over the place, won't it, when there's danger? What if you lose your job? What if your marriage falls apart? What if you can't find a date? What if your doctor gives you bad news? What if this test comes back negative or not good? What if your career doesn't play out the way you want it to? How are you going to pay for Christmas? What are you going to do to say to all those relatives who are asking why you're still single? Your family's coming over next week. Right? Are you ready for that? Are you ready for that? Right? This is the stuff your heart is always thinking about, right? On and on. And if you listen to your heart, you'll get caught in that endless cycles of worries and fears and wants and anxieties. You can listen to your heart or you can talk to your heart. And when those worries pop up, you can be ready for it. You can expect that things will not always work out as expected. There's a well-known psalm in the Old Testament. David writes in Psalm 42, he says, "Why are you so downcast, my soul?" He's talking to himself. Why are you so disturbed within me? Do you remember what he says then? He says, put your hope in God. I'm talking to you, heart. Why are you so anxious? Why are you so disturbed? Put your hope in God. I'm not going to listen to you. You're going to listen to me. Why so worried? Why so disturbed? Why so downcast? He responds himself. He talks to his heart. Put your hope in God. So let me ask you, if you're searching for more peace in your life, first, have you come to peace with God through Jesus? And second, are you growing in the peace of God? Are you listening to your heart or are you talking to it? And what do you tell your heart? Well, Paul tells us, verse 8. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Tell your heart of God's goodness. Remind your heart of God's grace and promises and protection and peace. All we tend to focus on is what we want. Everywhere we look, we see things we want. Even in our digital age, my mailbox is still full of catalogs. Who still orders things from catalogs, right? Maybe some. But I don't need catalogs. Why? Because every website I visit is trimmed with little alluring ads, right? Trying to draw me in. That somehow the thing knows what I might want, right? It listens to me. It tracks me. Some of you make a great deal of money figuring that sort of thing out, don't you, right? Wonder what he might want to see. Here's an ad you might like, right? Luring us down the path of all the things we didn't even know we wanted until we saw it, right? Let's just be honest. Can you remember a single gift you got last Christmas? How about two Christmases ago? I'll bet my kids couldn't even tell you one or two gifts they got in Christmas of 2015, just 2 years ago. Right, why? Because the heart's moved on. There are new things at once, new things. How can I live without this, right? I'm not going to focus on those things then. If my heart can be so flighty and go from thing to thing to thing, I'm not going to focus on those things that I want, that I'm missing. I'm going to focus on those things that I have, that are true and noble and right and pure and lovely. How much of the worry in our life simply flows from a focus on what we don't have instead of a confidence and gratefulness for what we do? And the worry creeps in when we're all obsessed with what we don't have instead of focusing on what it is that he's done. And we'll go to great lengths to get what we want, won't we? One of my favorite Christmas stories ever. I may have told you this before, I may not have. But it's about this little boy who desperately wants a bicycle. He wants it so bad, in fact, that instead of writing a letter to Santa, he's going all the way to the top. He decides to write a letter to Jesus, all right? And so he sits down at his paper in his room and he writes, "Dear Jesus, I've been a good boy this year. Can I please have a bicycle for Christmas?" But as he looks at the note, he's got to be honest that he actually wasn't all that good a kid this year, all right? And he knows Jesus knows that. So he grabs the note, crunches it up, throws it into the trash, starts again. "Dear Jesus, I tried hard to be a good boy this year. Can I please have a bicycle this Christmas?" But even then, as he looks at the paper there before him, the truth is he really didn't try all that hard, right? And so he crunches up the letter and he throws it in the trash can as well. And he sits very troubled for a moment until suddenly an idea comes to his mind. He runs from his room down the steps to the Christmas tree, under which is a little family nativity scene. And in that little family manger scene, he grabs the little Mary statue from underneath the tree in the manger scene. He runs back up into his room and he shoves that little Mary statue underneath his mattress. And he sits down to write one final note. "Dear Jesus, I have your mother. If you want to see her again, there better be a bike under my tree this Christmas," right? We'll do anything, right? So much of us focused whether or not we get what we want, whether we have what we want, what our heart wants. Friends, the path to peace is no longer listening to your heart, it's talking to your heart. I'm not going to listen to my heart tell me that my life would just be better if I had more. I'm going to tell my heart I have everything I need in Jesus. I'm not going to listen to my heart tell me that my life would be better if I had a different spouse, or if I had a different family, or if I had different kids. I'm going to tell my heart, God's called me to love this family, even in their imperfections, because I've got plenty of them myself. I'm not going to listen to my heart as it leads me down all these paths. I'm going to tell my heart, this is the path that God has called me to follow. And when we do this, look what happens. Philippians 4:9, he says, whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. Put it into practice. This will not come naturally for you. It doesn't come naturally for any of us. This only comes with practice. You notice what Paul says. You put this stuff into practice. You get better at this by learning and practicing. Think of the people you know who seem to have an otherworldly kind of peace. People in my own life who right now are dealing with unbelievable struggles, whether it's health, financial issues, relational garbage, threats like my friend in Honduras, crazy stuff that is threatening their lives in very real ways. And yet in my text conversations with him, I am overwhelmed by the level of peace I hear in the things he says, the things that he prays for. There's not fear, there's not worry, there's anxiety. Well, it was there, but instead of ruminating on it, simmering in it, he has instead told his heart, we will trust. We will trust. But if you ask them how they got that way, it's not just that they're more laid back than the rest of us. It's not that they're just kind of easygoing and we're all type A's. It's something they've learned. It's something they've developed. They've practiced learning to trust, talking to their heart rather than listening to it. Why so downcast, O my soul? Why so disturbed? Put your hope in God. And now maybe you're sitting here today and you're thinking, you make it sound so easy, Wolfgang. It can't be that easy. But let me just ask you, have you tried it? Are you practicing talking to your heart? Or do you just listen to it? Because you see, Jesus, this Prince of Peace, he not only came to give you peace with God, he's come to give you the peace of God. And maybe you don't think you need Christmas. I mean, your life's already full enough as it is. But let me ask you, do you need peace? Because if you need peace, then you need Christmas. Because it's through that baby that was born in a feed trough. It was through that little baby that grew up to be a man who healed and taught and modeled an otherworldly kind of peace. An unshakable confidence in God and his goodness. Who was able to be at peace even when God asked him to face a cross. And the hope that was fulfilled when he came back to life that very first Easter. He did all of this, yes, so we could have peace with God, but also so we could learn to have peace, the peace of God. So let me just ask you as you sit here this morning, do you have peace with God? Could today be that day when you say, Jesus, I need to make that right. I need what you have to offer. I acknowledge my sin and struggle. I look to you, and I ask you for a new beginning, peace with God. But I want to go even a step further. I'll ask you, are you experiencing the peace of God right now, completely unrelated to your circumstances? Well, maybe it's time to stop listening to your heart and instead start talking to it. Why so downcast? Why so disturbed? Put your trust in God. You bow your head with me. Let's ask for this peace. God, no matter who we are, no matter where we're from, no matter what we have, no matter what we're facing, I can't think of anybody that I know who wouldn't like more peace. And I don't just mean for circumstances to change. I'm talking about something deeper, something enduring, something tenacious that holds on in spite of circumstances. God, I thank you for the incredible gift you gave us in building a bridge through your Son Christ, through your Son Jesus, for us to be able to be at peace with you. And I pray this will continue to be a church where people can come to discover that possibility of peace with you. But Lord, I pray for those in this room who know you but are not experiencing the peace you offer, who find themselves bound by worry and anxiety and fear. Lord, I pray that in your grace, and I ask this for myself, I pray, God, will you teach us to talk to our hearts instead of just listening to them? To remind ourselves of your trustworthiness, of your promises, of your provision, of your peace. Father, I pray that no matter what it is that we're facing in our lives, even right now, I pray that you will overwhelm everyone in this room with your sense of peace. I pray, God, for peace for my friend in Honduras. I pray, God, for peace for my friend facing chemo. I pray, God, for peace for my friend whose marriage is unraveling. God, I pray for peace for all of us in this room. Speak to our hearts. Remind us who you are. And invite us to come to your altar. Open your arms to us, even with our struggles, even with our fears. Wrap us in your arms and fill us with your peace. I pray in the name of the Prince of Peace.